Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, Anne.
All right. Thanks very much for availing yourself, and thanks to Dr. Maramba, who's also presenting. We'll just take the opportunity to just quickly test that you can share your slides. So maybe we'll check with Dr. Maramba if he's ready, since he will be the second presenter, to start by seeing if he can share his slides. Dr. Maramba? Dr. Maramba?
Hello, Dr. Machingula.
How are you?
I'm okay. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Yes.
I was muted.
I'm sorry about that. So we are just saying, since you are the second presenter, we will start with Prof. Davison. We'll start with you, so that when we go on to Glenda, she will just remain on a first slide.
Oh, okay. All right.
You can try to see if you can share the slides.
Okay.
Yes.
Sonia
and Prakesh, how are you? Yes, you can try to share the slides.
Okay, let me try that.
Greetings, Ian. Greetings, everyone.
Greetings,
Good morning.
Ian.
Greetings.
Greetings, everyone.
Yeah, we are well. Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to another day, and looking forward to a fruitful presentation.
Sure, sure. So I hope all the speaker has already been joined the webinar. Ian, please confirm.
Yes, yes, the speakers have joined in. The Prof. Erasmus will join us later on.
Okay, so every speakers, they will be having a right to share and unshare their screen. In addition, they can unmute themselves. Okay.
Yes. And we are trying to see. Yes.
It's I'm coming. The message is coming saying our host disabled participant screen sharing, so it's not activated.
All right. Sonia, Dr. Maramba is unable to share.
Okay, let me just check from the backend. Any other speaker is facing same challenge? Please let me know.
Oh, all right. Glenda, can you also
I'm going to try now.
All right. Sorry. So we see that it's common.
Okay,
yeah, Glenda can share. Yes, that's fine. Do you want to see if you can go down? If you can, if you can do a slide presentation and go down, if it's working. Yeah. You are seeing them well? Yeah, we are seeing them well.
Yeah, it's working. Mr. Marambe, if you can just try now.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, it's about to come through. Yes. Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Yeah.
You can try to do slideshow and see if they're going down.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see them well. I'm not sure also from your end.
Yeah, I can see. I can move. I'm moving. I can see them moving.
All right. That's That's fine. That's fine then. Okay, thank you. So maybe we can allow Glenda to share a first slide, so that at least she'll be the one who will be starting.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead then.
Yes. So at least we have 4 minutes before we start, and we seem to be set. Right. It's on the 2nd, I think. Yes. Thank you. All right, Sonia, we are set. We will just wait for 5 to start, and all is well.
Sure.
All right, all right.
I can see people are joining, so I would suggest Ian will wait for 2 more minutes. We will start in next 5 to 6 minutes. So the participant
all right.
will, yeah.
Or give a few minutes for colleagues to join in. That's fine. So give a few more minutes to allow colleagues to join. We'll give 2 or so minutes, but we'll start the presentation on time. The first presenter will be on time. They'll be able to start their presentation at 9:05. We'll just give a few minutes to allow others. Okay, good morning. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you to a series which is being put forward by the University of Zimbabwe, Department of Laboratory Diagnostic and Investigative Sciences, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Department of Biomedical Sciences, Stellenbosch University Division of Chemical Pathology, University of Pretoria Department of Chemical Pathology, in collaboration with the African Federation of Clinical Chemistry and Laboratory Medicine and Empower School of Health. And this initiative is referred to as the African Consortium of Laboratory System Strengthening, having realized that in Africa we face similar issues and challenges. This consortium does put together series of talks that addresses the issues that we face as lab practitioners in Africa in order to find ways of exchanging ideas, knowledge, skills, so that we continue to build the skill base in Africa. And this week is the Lab Professionals Week, the Medical Laboratory Professionals Week. And as the African Consortium of Lab System Strengthening, we saw it fit that we also discuss another issue about the medical laboratory career opportunities, so that as practitioners in the lab, we remind of ourselves of what is available, because it's easy when you're in the lab to just be stuck in the routine of processing samples and doing all that you are doing, which is good, but we also need to be able to come to the realization that there are also other career opportunities. There are other things that we need also done by laboratory practitioners in order to have a fully functional medical laboratory which support even the testing that you will be doing as individuals. So hence the importance of this discussion on laboratory career opportunities. And hence this would be very handy for one to the practitioners in practice. We also need to open our eyes to what is available for us as practitioners, and to our students as well, who are our future. They also need to be enlightened of the opportunities or what they can also do in the lab. So hence this is quite an important component, apart from being able to pass the lab specific skills and knowledge, but also career opportunities need to be talked about, and we need to constantly remind ourselves and be willing to learn from one another. And we've brought together a panel, and we have Professor Glenda Davison and Dr. Maramba who will do some presentation. And these presentations are so related, so we will have a fora where we will discuss at the end, a roundtable discussion where they will be, they and other colleagues will be able to facilitate dialogue as we discuss about the medical laboratory career opportunities. And so when you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box, or you'll be able to raise your hand at the end and be able to be addressed on your question. And we will be starting our first presentation. Our first presentation will be from Professor Glenda Davison on medical laboratory sciences, the future opportunities and challenges. Professor Glenda Davison is the head of biomedical sciences at the Department of Cape Peninsula University of Technology. And she's already logged on her first slide. So Professor Glenda Davison, over to you. Can you to take us through the medical laboratory sciences, future opportunities and challenges? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
And thank you, Dr. Mashungura, and thank you once again. Hello?
Oh, there's someone who has a mic that's on.
Okay. No problem. But thank you, Ian, for inviting me. But I'd also like to thank you for driving this initiative. The whole consortium, I think in the last year, it's achieved so much, and it is such a necessary initiative in Africa. And I'd like to thank you and your team for driving it. But today I have been asked to talk about medical laboratory science, opportunities and challenges, and that is what I'm going to do. And to outline how I've sort of addressed this. The first slide, I'm just going to remind you of what we are as a profession. And then I've identified 4 factors that I believe are going to influence the future laboratory. And we can see them maybe as opportunities. I certainly do. Some people might see them as challenges, and other people may see them even as threats, which I certainly don't do. And I'm going to go through each of them. Then I'm going to just end off by saying, how should we as professionals adapt to this? What should we be doing? And then we'll leave it open for the discussion panel to take it further. So, medical laboratory science, we're all in this amazing profession. And if I look at it, I think we can say that we perform complex and simple tests on patient samples using sophisticated equipment, but sometimes very simple manual tests as well. And the results of these tests play a vital role in identifying and diagnosing disease, treating diseases, and of course monitoring disease. And I think you can go into the literature and you will see that most people agree that around 60 to 70% of clinical decisions are based on laboratory tests performed by our profession. So that shows the big impact that our profession makes on healthcare. But we don't only do that, we also perform research. We validate new instruments and new methods for laboratories. And very importantly, we ensure the quality of those results. And in fact, I think we're probably the most important cog in that wheel, where we ensure that the results we issue are accurate and we maintain good laboratory practice. And last but not least is training. And I think this is where we come in, because we as a profession together are responsible for ensuring that we produce a new generation of laboratory professionals. So let me go to my first opportunity or challenge, and that is the changing face of healthcare and technology. I don't think we can deny it, but the demographics of people all over the world is rapidly changing. So around here in 2022, it's estimated we have around 7 billion people on Earth. But we're not going to stop growing. And in fact, in less than 100 years, by 2100, it's estimated that the world will have over 11 billion people. So that in itself is a challenge for healthcare and laboratories. But the demographics is going to change. And I'd like to take you to this graph over here, which I got off the internet, and that's very interesting because on the x-axis is the percentage of the world's population that will be over 60 years of age. And the light blue bars are present time, and the purple is 2050. So you can see here the percentage of the population over 60 years of age in the world is going to more than double in these next few decades. And in Africa, where we are as Africans, you can see we are the youngest continent, which is a great advantage. But even here, the percentage of our population over 60 is also going to double. And of course, that presents a whole host of new diseases and demographics that laboratories will have to tackle. But added to that is urbanization and migration. Now, already I can tell you that in South Africa, around 70% of people are already living in urban areas. And this is going to become an issue all over the world. People migrate to urban and cities because that's where the growth is and the job growth is. It might not be a healthy place, and other problems occur, which again will affect healthcare and laboratories. And then we come to climate change. I don't think anybody can deny climate change. We're seeing extreme weather patterns, and climate change is thought to also introduce a whole array of healthcare issues and the emergence of new pathogens. And I think we've already seen that with COVID-19. And it's predicted that this is not the first pandemic, we're going to see more in the future. So of course, laboratories will have to adapt to that. And then last of all, we're going to see, and already are seeing, huge technological developments. And most importantly, at the bottom here is the emergence of the field of genomics, which we have to, as laboratory professionals, take note of. So to get back to disease patterns, because this is definitely going to affect labs, on the right here, this is a graph that was published in 2017, which is not such a long time ago, but in fact, I'd like to tell you that probably things have changed a little bit since then. But this graph is on Africa, and it predicts the healthcare or disease pattern changes from the year 2000 to 2030. And we can see this pink line here is the non-communicable diseases, which has steadily been increasing and is predicted to increase even more by 2030 and beyond. And at the time of writing this article, it was predicted that the infectious diseases, communicable diseases, which have here HIV, malaria, TB, etc., would steadily decrease. But I wonder here in 2022 how this graph might have changed with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we mustn't forget these other two lines down here. The red one is injuries, trauma, car accidents, which as we get more and more urbanization is also predicted to increase. And then the maternal and nutritional and perinatal disorders is thought to also steadily decrease. So it's often thought that Africa suffers a dual burden of disease. So we sit here in 2022, we've got a high level of non-communicable diseases and still a very high level of communicable diseases. And that places large stress on healthcare and laboratories, and it is going to increase into the future. So my second opportunity or challenge and I definitely think this one is an opportunity, is the advancement in genomics and personalized medicine. So as we, as a profession and the world, increase the knowledge of the human genome and its role in health and disease, new treatments are being developed with this knowledge that can personalize treatment. And of course, the laboratory plays a huge role in that. But just to show you the evolution of this in laboratories, I think when I trained back in the 80s, we were here in this first block here where physicians or doctors did a physical examination and they sent an array of tests to a laboratory. We still do this. And the laboratory doing biochemical tests, hematology, microbiology would assist in making the diagnosis. But as we moved into the 90s, the late 80s and 90s, we started seeing the emergence of cytogenetic laboratories, the study of chromosomes, and that became very important, particularly in malignancies. And now we are moving into this era where we are doing targeted gene testing. We're doing RT-PCR, qPCR, and this is throughout all the disciplines in our field, microbiology and hematology and other disciplines. And this is becoming quite routine now in laboratories. But we are steadily, and we've seen that during the COVID-19 pandemic, moving into this era where next generation sequencing, whole genome sequencing, RNA sequencing is becoming the norm. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So this is the future of laboratory medicine in all disciplines. And even going further into the future, and these technologies exist, looking at epigenetics, single cell sequencing, looking at cell-free DNA and RNA. So as laboratory professionals, we need to look to the future and be able to educate ourselves and grasp these opportunities in our laboratories. And this slide just takes it a little bit further and introduces another opportunity to it, because genomics is becoming the norm, but it's also changing the way we do things in labs. So at the moment, yes, we will always have sample processing. We are going to get the samples from patients. We have to extract our DNA and RNA. We're going to have to practically do the sequencing and DNA analysis or RNA analysis. But this is just the first two steps. The bulk of the processing or analysis lies in big data analysis. First of all, analyzing those DNA sequences. What nucleotides did we find? Then going into identifying mutations. And we've seen that so importantly in the COVID-19 pandemic. We were able to identify different variants of the virus. But taking analysis further in humans, in particularly malignancies, what do those mutations do? What are they doing in the cell? So further analysis needs to be done. And then, of course, most importantly, with all this data, we have to draw up a report for the physician or the doctor treating that particular patient. So you can see that instead of just doing the test, our profession has now a huge opportunity and a challenge to analyze and interpret data. And that's going to introduce us into a new field called bioinformatics. So in Africa, you can see that next generation sequencing and the technology for that is here already. This article was published in the Lancet in 2021, very recent, and it's looking at genomic informed pathogen surveillance. So this is for viruses and other pathogens, but the technology is there, and therefore it can spill over into other disciplines, looking at malignancies, inflammatory disorders. And we can see that the capability for genomics, next generation sequencing is all over Africa. In South Africa, yes, there's quite a large capability, and most labs are introducing it, but we can see it here, and this is going to grow at a fast pace. And I would say even in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see these blue dots spread even all over the continent and grow even larger. So this is a huge opportunity for us to grasp and take control over. So, related to this is the emergence of clinical bioinformatics, because we can generate all this data, this next generation sequencing data and other data, but it needs analysis and interpretation. And bioinformatics is already being performed in South Africa, all over the world. So just to give you a definition of bioinformatics, and this is taken straight out of the internet so that we understand it. It's a field of science, so it's a new field on its own. It uses computers, databases, maths, statistics to collect, store, organize, and analyze large amounts of biological, medical, and health information. So this is even going beyond laboratory data. So here's a beautiful diagram which I think illustrates it so well. So here you're going to have a professional who has the skills of bioinformatics and will be extracting data from molecular biology, genomics, drug designs, pharmaceutical things, other databases, all kinds of big data, and interpreting it and analyzing it. And these are the new skills that I think are going to be required in modern laboratories. How can we fill these gaps? Well, currently bioinformatics is performed by PhD doctorates, scientists who are usually postgraduates, not in our field, but usually have an undergrad degree in genetics or maths or computer science. There are a number of postgrad courses being offered all over the world in bioinformatics. But what is really lacking is our discipline of medical laboratory professionals, because many of the bioinformaticists lack knowledge in the clinical disciplines of hematology, chemical pathology, microbiology, and the others. And so when interpreting this huge data, that knowledge is often lacking. And this is something I haven't come up with. It's come up from people in the field themselves. So there is a need for us to start including this in undergraduate courses, whether it's a course on its own or within our own field, is something we can debate. So my third challenge and opportunity, and this is with us already, but it's just going to expand, is machine learning and artificial intelligence. So already our big laboratory analyzers are already introducing algorithms that assist with the diagnosis of a disease, looking at the lab results that are being produced, and in my field, hematology, identifying abnormal cells. And I'm not talking about a 3-part or 5-part differential. That's been with us quite a while. I'm looking at deeper analysis of those cells. And these kinds of algorithms are being introduced, particularly in these disciplines. And they use deep learning, artificial neural networks. And somebody who's in computer science will understand that far better than me. But they can take cells or images and look at all kinds of parameters within that image not just sizing and fluorescence, but all kinds of level, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, the granularity, and are able to classify those cells, not only into what kind of cell, but whether they're healthy, unhealthy, whether they are myeloid, lymphoid, and make a diagnosis without human contact. And as the artificial intelligence develops, they are becoming more and more accurate at doing this. And so as a laboratory professional, we need to manage this revolution. And because, as we know, we're still going to need some human intervention in this whole process of artificial intelligence. So to end off on this whole big data and machine learning, this was just a picture I took off the internet, but we can see that the influence of machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data is going to influence laboratories at all stages, from sample collection, drones, autonomous vehicles delivering samples, right through to data analysis and reporting. And you can see all the different types of data coming in to the laboratory. And we as laboratory professionals will have to manage this process. Now, my fourth challenge or opportunity goes in another direction, and that is point of care testing. This has been with us for a while, and many people don't only see it as a challenge, but in fact as a threat. And I'm going to say not at all. This is most definitely an opportunity. I'm going to take you to this graph on the right, which shows actually being published by a sales company, but looks at the point of care instruments that have been sold over the years from 2013 to 2022. And they've looked at the various types, and you can see they cover a whole lot of routine disciplines. But for me, what I want to point out is the steady increase in them. It's not a dramatic increase, but from 2013 to 2022, there is a steady increase in point of care instrumentation and devices spreading throughout the world in all disciplines. So this is something we have to grasp with. And they are a huge advantage and have several benefits. They're affordable, they're very sensitive, specific, they're quite easy to use. They provide a rapid test, which is a huge advantage. And they are, most important, delivered right there to those who need it. So laboratory testing at the bedside or point of care, however you want to describe it, point of care could be at a clinic where a patient enters the healthcare system, has huge benefits. It provides an early diagnosis and prompt treatment, and that is very important for patients and healthcare generally. And so the test results can be delivered right there without having to transport a patient large distances or a sample large distances to a central lab. It's very good in monitoring conditions. And I've just picked out two here, warfarin monitoring. Many patients who've had DVTs, thrombosis on warfarin, and you can measure their INR using a point of care device, or in diabetic monitoring. And they have a huge reduction in cost. So there's huge benefits to these devices, but they have challenges. These tests are often performed by many different kinds of professionals, not laboratory professionals, but often by a receptionist in a doctor's waiting room, or a nurse in a rural clinic, or a pharmacist. And many of these professionals don't have laboratory training. And that, of course, leads to a lack of quality control, which can be very serious and overrule all the benefits of point-of-care testing if you give an inaccurate result. Patients need something that's accurate and that can guide treatment. So here is the opportunity for our profession to grasp, because I believe we should be playing a big role in point-of-care testing. We should be the professionals that are training other professionals to do these tests and to be able to handle the quality control and the maintenance of these devices. And I believe as universities and as a profession, we should be developing short courses for all these, this array of people who are doing these tests. So the last couple of slides, I'm just going to look a little bit into the future. So what is the laboratory of the future going to look like? Well, if I read about this, there are two parallel trends. The one is, as you can see from what I've said, the formation of large integrated laboratories or laboratory networks, where all these highly specialized tests are going to be consolidated into core facilities. This is already happening. So you would have genomic testing, flow cytometry, and large instrumentation all consolidated into a core facility, generating huge data that is then having to be transported back to the hospital or the clinical facilities. But on the other side of the coin is an increase in near patient testing or point of care and a less reliance on central laboratories. So these seem to be opposite in nature, but both important, and our profession, the laboratory professionals, need to play a role in both of these trends. So here is an integrated laboratory network, and this is already happening in big centralized labs. So instead of many of these labs, the routine practical tasks are going to be done by automation and robotics. And the future lab will need to be very efficient and cost effective, because they are going to be generating huge data. And as laboratory professionals, we can see them standing here in purple lab coats, instead of doing the tests, they're going to be interpreting and analyzing the data. And that requires additional skills to what we have at present. So what type of laboratory professional are we going to need? Our profession is not dying. Many people used to tell me the profession of medical technology and medical science is a dying profession. Not at all, but we do have to evolve and respond to these rapid changes, because we are the profession that's going to oversee this development in our laboratories. We have to take the bull by the horns and make it happen. And so our focus is going to be on data analysis and integration of laboratory tests. And there's a huge move in the literature that instead of, like in South Africa, where medical laboratory professionals choose a specialization in their undergrad degree, there is a move that we would graduate somebody in what we call blood sciences. And this will have all the disciplines, heme, micro, transfusion, biochemistry, and immunology, and others. So the graduate would be able to integrate all these laboratory tests. And they would have to understand the pathogenesis of disease, understand specialized techniques, genomics, flow cytometry, and others. Genomics, vitally important, and I've put that here because this is increasing at a huge rate. And then some of the other softer skills, problem solving. Not problem solving according to a standard operating procedure, but being able to look at a problem and get solutions from a wide variety of sources. Be independently thinking, critically evaluate the data that's being generated, and of course, perform research on that data and be innovative. And I think this sort of diagram depicts this, where we can see professionals being highly versatile and being able to adapt to change very quickly. And so my last slide before I say thank you, how does higher education respond? That's where we are at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology and the University of Zimbabwe and others. So I think we need to look at our curricula very critically with a long-term view, not looking at 2022 or even 2030. We should be looking at what does a professional need in 2050. We need to be including genomics in all disciplines, if it has not been done already. We need to integrate more. And I know some universities are already looking at this. So a person who gets their undergrad degree has an integrated degree, and that specialization maybe should be offered as a postgraduate qualification. And I think the University of Zimbabwe and other universities really do this, but I'd like to challenge South Africa to perhaps look at this. Bioinformatics. Should this be part of the undergrad program? Should we be developing new programs? Or do we leave it as a postgraduate? I know at CPUT, we are looking at developing a BSc in bioinformatics. And throughout our training of our students, we need to emphasize critical thinking, not just memorizing techniques or learning how to read an SOP, but to critically evaluate and think about problems. Innovation, and last but not least, at the bottom here is point of care. And that goes beyond our profession. But I think as higher institutions, we need to start looking at this in a more, and not only for higher institutions, but the profession as a whole needs to look at that. So that is where I'm going to leave you, and hope that I've generated some points for the panel discussion later, which I certainly look forward to being part of. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to our chair, Ian, if you'd like to take over. And thank you very, very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Prof. Davison, for that interesting talk on the medical lab sciences, future opportunities and challenges. And it's interesting that the challenges create lots of opportunities, and we are there to continue working and creating a next generation who is able to face the future, which is uncertain, but has lots of opportunities. And this builds well into the next presentation by Dr. Aaron Maramba. Dr. Aaron Maramba, you can start sharing your slide. Is going to talk on modernization of medical laboratory sciences career. Dr. Aaron Maramba is the coordinator of the Medical Laboratory Sciences Program and is a senior lecturer in hematology at the University of Zimbabwe. Zianab Najim, can you kindly mute your mic? Sonia, can you assist in? All right, thank you. Dr. Maramba, can you kindly share your slide?
Thank you, Dr. Machingura.
Whilst he's opening his slides and getting ready for the presentation, I just want to allude to the fact that at the end of these two talks, we are open for discussion, roundtable discussion. for points that have been generated during the presentations and as we interrogate the medical laboratory sciences career opportunity. And also to note that this webinar is being beamed live on Facebook and is also being recorded for those who have missed the some parts of the session. You can always use the link that we have shared. Sonia has shared in the chat box. You can always get to the recording. And also to note, we'll be able to share with you the presentations so that you can refer to them as well. Over to you, Dr. Aaron Maramba.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Machingula, for organizing this. My presentation is going to be on the modernization of medical laboratory science careers. But speaking immediately after Professor Davison, she's taken away everything that I was about to say, because it happened that our presentations are so related, like what Dr. Machingura said. So you find that a lot of things that she has mentioned are also contained in my presentation. I'll try to put it in a different way, but our audience will pick some other things that may have been mentioned already. So my presentation, the overview is, I've decided to go back to the origins of medical lab sciences. Then took it through the history up to now. What we perceive as challenges or what are regarded as opportunities. So these challenges presents us with opportunities to be able to recognize that science is not static and science is ever changing. So we need to approach it in that way. So I'll talk about the origins of medical lab sciences, the professional identity. When the profession was developing and people who were in the field were trying to model the profession into a profession that is that we could look at as a distinct profession, which included recognition as a profession and the career advancements as they faced challenges. So where we are today is as a result of our predecessors who went through those challenges to give us what we have. So the origins of the profession, the field started in the early 1900s. And between 1890 to 1910, women were able to pursue careers in scientific profession. And this period leading up to the First World War, women were not involved in war, so they were co-opted into the profession. So clinical laboratories became established in hospitals. They started, lab work started as side rooms in hospitals. In some hospitals, when we look around, we can see the side rooms that are there. This was work being done by clinicians or pathologists on the sidelines. And the clinical utility of laboratory tests became more widely recognized by physicians as the number of tests increased. So when the pathologists were doing this, they had what they perceived to be the ideal technician or ideal laboratory scientist, what they must be. So as early as the 1920s, women, as I said, learned that they were particularly well suited for performing laboratory work because of the attributes that they possessed. So pathologists and the lab technicians then also described that as ideal technician, where the professional, these attributes were written in journals. And although in reality, what was perceived to be the ideal didn't turn out to be, the relationship between the clinical pathologists who were there before the lab science profession was developed and the laboratory technicians at the time were described this as one of the mutual interdependence between the technicians and the pathologists. However, in reality, the pathologists maintain the strict supervision and control over the work of laboratory technicians. We still see this in many other countries where the separation between the laboratory scientist and the pathologist is not clearly there, or where the scientists feel that we are living under the limelight of the pathologist. So the real laboratory technician differed markedly from the ideal prototype, which was created by the public and the pathologists and by the laboratory technicians themselves. So that's the difference between the ideal and the real thing that was there. So the first clinical laboratory scientists began working in a clinical laboratory shortly after the First World War, which was in the 1914, 1918, thereabout. During the war, for the First World War, and in the years that followed, the critical shortage of the trained laboratory personnel developed because as the profession grew, more tests became co-opted on, and there was need for them to get this diagnosis. So we started seeing it coming up. So to alleviate that shortage, pathologists began to hire young women, as I said, training them on the job to perform simple laboratory tests. So the training for the lab personnel, its origin started with training on the job as an apprentice. So this went on for long. As apprentice, most countries training for the laboratory scientists was at diploma level, not to denigrate it to compare to the degree, but the nature of the job needed to be hands-on. So it was started as a diploma in many countries. Here in Zimbabwe, where I'm speaking from, we had diploma training up to the 1990s when we changed to introduce the first degree in medical laboratory sciences. However, even up to this day, the nature of the diploma training is that it's more like an apprentice kind of training. So the first clinical laboratories and noticeable shortages were driven by the increase in the volumes and the profiles that came. So the number of tests that needed to be done and the diverse tests that came along. However, there were no established training standards because the training was being done on the job and there was no benchmarking at the time. So that's where we see that there are no established standards there. So a few institutions offered a systematic method of instruction, basically like what we see today as SOP. This was meant to have standardization for the training in lab testing. So during the same period, educational programs were established, which were done outside the hospitals. Remember, when the profession started, it started in the hospital, within that setup. But there was need for the theory to be taught, so that was taken out of the hospital setting to institutions like universities. So the story that I will tell of the history of medical lab sciences will touch what they experienced in America and also the United Kingdom, then coming back to Zimbabwe. So I'm just talking about my experiences of what the profession went through. So the profession which was being developed, the identity was supposed to be found. So it started emerging from the 1928 to 1945, where the clinical laboratory science began to develop professional identity of its own. This is coming from the being trained by pathologists. So the achievements that were seen during that period included commitment to the development of formal mechanism to serve their specific interests and needs, which was supposed to be done or which was done independently from the pathologists. So the pathologists were successful, however, in maintaining the control over other aspects of the clinical laboratory scientists. When I did my training in the early 90s, in Zimbabwe particularly, we had the domination of the pathologists. Labs could not be run by scientists themselves. Pathologists must be at the top. This eventually changed as we went into the 2000s and so on, but that's just politics in the professions. So the beginnings of the profession, the Board of Registry in America we played a significant role in the early development of clinical laboratory sciences. Having realized that the training was being done on the job, the next thing that was supposed to be done is to recognize the professional who was coming out. The board established the standards for competence. Competence is very important thing to benchmark or to be able to reproduce a result. So the board established the standard of competence for entry-level practitioners, and a mechanism for assessing competence was also developed, and developed accreditation processes and education programs. So the recognition of the clinical laboratory sciences profession status, which happened in 1962 to 77. So between these years, the field of clinical laboratory sciences experienced many challenges of trying to win themselves off the control by pathologists. In America, they refer them as technologists. So medical technologists is in supervisory position became more involved in higher management functions, such as organizing and directing laboratory operations. And also the clinical laboratory science educators, because remember the education was being done outside the hospital, they also developed the graduate programs that would prepare faculty for positions in 2 or 3 year programs, which were also the best. So the same period, there's records that there was a period of turmoil from the 1962 to 77 by virtue of its close association, because remember the profession started off from the pathologist's directions and instructions, making what they perceived to be an ideal scientist or technician. So the association of the American Society of Clinical Pathologists then released them, and there was an association of medical technologists, which became drawn into a series of legal actions, because obviously what the pathologists wanted done or what the scientists or technologists were taking up, where there was conflict. However, all this was dropped off. The clinical scientists achieved several victories during the same period of the turmoil, whereby with respect to certification of our professionals and the mandatory registration with the board. So responsibility of accreditation of educational programs was shifted from the board of schools to the national accreditation of our clinical laboratory scientists, which was established. And we also see the national certification agents coming up for the medical laboratory technologists. So having realized that the scientists, for them to be recognized profession, we need standardization. This had to be taken into schools. So the medical training schools came up for medical lab scientists. So trained medical laboratory scientists today, as we speak, are behind a more complex procedure being carried out on person specimens, which is what we call laboratory testing. And there are so many disciplines. Professor Davidson mentioned a lot of them. Sometimes broadly, when we speak, we talk about immunology, immunohematology is blood transfusion. We talk about molecular biology. We also talk about cytotechnology, which is histology in many other cases, microbiology and clinical chemistry. So these are some of the disciplines that we talk about broadly. But as we move in, and remember, I'm talking about modernizing. As we are modernizing our professions, we need to go deeper into these broader disciplines and look at what the challenges that are facing and what how we must respond. So compared to the clinical laboratory technician, who usually have an associate degree, medical laboratory scientists are qualified and certified to carry out more complex procedures. So the career advancement for the bench level scientists, because we call ourselves technically skilled individuals who are on the bench, but the modernization of careers mean that we all cannot be sitting at the bench. We need to take it at a next level. So depending on the size of infrastructure and the facilities, there are 2 broad career paths that a clinical laboratory bench scientist is able to explore. we are looking at personnel management, as well as technical management. So on personnel management, this area may include positions such as the laboratory, operational managers, and supervisors. So the responsibilities here for the personnel management will include laboratory budgetary items, the scheduling of duties, proficiency testing, which is to do with competencies, and performance assessments, just to make sure that we have got a cadre who is competent. And also looking at higher administrative matters. For many years in the past, the lab scientist or the laboratory professional was behind the scenes. They didn't have the responsibility in administration, but we are seeing that change coming up. So when we go to the technical management, some examples of the technical management will include the lead scientist or the technical specialists, which in some respects we also see product specialists if we take it away from the testing environment, but looking at the service provision by the technical diagnostic companies. We also see research and development scientists and quality assurance officers, because quality is key to guaranteeing a good result and the outcomes that we want. So the technical management roles and responsibility also in modern laboratories, this has become highly computerized, and automation of equipment has also come in. It has presented opportunities, as we would want to say. So these factors now require a network of interface, of infrastructure support, which is unique to IT. So the handling of information that is generated in the lab needs a IT system. So scientists have taken up that role. Instead of getting someone from outside without that background, we need to have someone with a scientific background. So in many institutions, laboratories, the scientists are trained on the job in order to bridge the gap between IT and the lab. Because our training in the universities doesn't focus on IT. So you'll find that when someone has graduated with their degree in laboratory sciences, they will be faced with this challenge of handling the data that is generated or managing the results that are coming. So that's where the IT comes in. So we've seen scientists who have graduated and have gone on to work as IT scientists or develop programs that are used for managing information. So further institutions are migrating to new laboratory information systems, which are more compatible with the modern electronic medical records. Here in Zimbabwe, we've got scientists who have gone on to develop lab information systems, which are being used in private labs, and even some of them in public sector. So the results in some institutions has been the creation of technical management positions, which specifically foster the IT and LIMS realm. So educational advancement and certification came in because these challenges are keeping on coming. We are developing the profession. So in general, personnel in clinical laboratories hold university degrees. As I said, here in Zimbabwe, we moved from diplomas for the highest, for the basic training for a scientist. We moved from a diploma in the 90s to a degree. Although we also have a cadre who is called, in Zimbabwe, is a technician or state certified technician. In other countries, they call them medical laboratory assistant. Those ones tend to have a lower qualification, but here the degree is the basic training. So in biological sciences, we can also have others in biochemistry, in clinical laboratory sciences, which we have. This may also, you may also have people with 2-year certificates, which are the trainee, which are the technicians in our case, or MLAs in other countries. These have also been trained on the job. In other institutions, you find that a lab that is attached to a hospital or certain institutions, for example, here in Zimbabwe, the blood transfusion, the technician is trained on the job. So the institution continues to do that because universities haven't got that qualification offered. So in many institutions, it is highly desirable for management candidates to have a 4-year degree or management course, which is lab related. So positioning In possessing an advanced degree such as a master's is a common thing here now in Zimbabwe. It's important, so because the profession is becoming bigger and bigger. So to match those challenges, people must be highly skilled and more qualified to deal with them. So why does lab sciences need to evolve? It has to evolve because it's a science. We are seeing rapid advances in science that have been delivered. We're also seeing change in patient demographics with the aging population. We need to be able to deal with that. So this is also driving the need to deliver services differently and also closer to home, which brings us to how can we deal with that? It is challenging for individuals to progress with their careers. In the past, when I trained, we used to have a ceiling, maybe because institutions didn't offer qualifications for us to break that ceiling, or maybe the structures for administration didn't allow for a medical lab professional to be able to get up to that level. But that has been removed now, or we have fought to remove it. So those challenges between the separation of specialisms also, when I trained, we used to have specialists. I think it's important to have those specialisms that are there, but you may find that someone wants to change from one specialism to another because the basic skills are the same. We have got issues to do with the lack of structured training for some high skill clinical roles, which we dearly need. We desperately need that. We need to have people who are highly skilled, and these would have to assist in the profession. So this brings us to the change game. So from the days of waiting for results in minutes, now we're looking at the turnaround times. The turnaround time is determined by the kind of test that we offer and also the importance of the result that we put to it. So reducing the turnaround times by bringing the test near to the patient is key. We also have issues to do with reflex testing, whereby you do not have to wait for the request to be made. However, we still have a challenge where we are not allowed, if it's genetic tests, we are not allowed to request tests that do not have a clinician approval or a test that has not been approved. We also have issues to do with sample sharing. This speeds up the turnaround times by sharing samples. We don't have to go back to the patient. We remove the inconvenience of wanting to rebleed the patient to get another sample to go and do other tests. So the strides that have so far been made in medical labs have improved. These are direct response to challenges which have been faced by our predecessors. So where we are is as a result of the work that has been done by our predecessors. When the temperature changes, dinosaurs ceased to exist. So we are seeing the change in temperature. We need to adapt to those changes and move on. Dr. Davison talked about the point of care testing, which in some respects are also referred to as near patient testing. So I'll talk about near patient testing in two settings. The first setting is within the healthcare setting. So the benefits that are drawn within the healthcare settings. So the largest benefit is that it can be done rapidly and can be performed by clinical personnel who are not trained in the clinical laboratory. It comes with these challenges. She's already mentioned them. The rapid test results can provide a physician with answers that can quickly help to determine the course of action or how to treat that patient. This has obviously got benefits in almost any setting. If you consider that in an emergency setting, you don't have to wait for the result to come from the lab, which may be far removed from the setting. So having faster access to the results when being presented with the patient for the first time, this provides the physician with the answers when they are with the patient. And also when they're going to see the patient, the results will be available. It will be there in a matter of minutes as opposed to waiting for the result to come back. We also see the benefits of point of care near patient testing when you are outside the healthcare system. We are talking about mobile testing and monitoring devices that are emerging, which provide advanced care. So the mobile monitoring and self-administration of drugs in patients will provide them with a better quality of life. We're talking about some home-based care where we cannot have a lab located there. So these devices will range from home health monitoring to vital statistics, which are periodic testing, where someone needs to be tested regularly. That can be done at home. So the patients and home care staff are able to perform remote tests and automatically transmit those results back to the healthcare. This is where the IT comes in. This is where we talk about remote access to the results. The testing is done there, but the results come so that they are integrated. So the healthcare employee involves nurses, healthcare workers, physicians. These are able to view the results which are done away from the hospital setting. So in some cases, urgent cases, these devices which are given to be mobile, to be out there in remote, can call an ambulance, which means we are looking at providing them with a better quality of life without them having to come to hospital for testing, but they will just come when the results are available. However, when we compare the near patient testing to the core laboratory setting, we see that the testing can happen rapidly, and this can be done by clinical personnel who are not trained. This can also be an obvious detriment to the testing. So we have to step up to the challenge as scientists. So most of the personnel conducting the point of care testing, which is what the near patient testing, they are not lab trained personnel, which brings the element of this lack of training in laboratory testing. This implies that the lack of understanding of the lab sciences and the practice for determining the reality of the test. So we need to own this. Where I've worked the point of testing, the institutions that manage the labs, you've got to take control of the results that are coming there so that they are integrated in the patient record. There's also a lack of knowledge of the particular test method, which is core to the laboratory, and this includes both pre-analytical and post-analytical. So imagining the person who is testing is not lab qualified. They don't have an appreciation of the pre-analytical variables and those post-analytical variables. So these processes are key to determine the quality and accuracy of the result. Accuracy is one thing that we as scientists, we would like to have in there. So it takes us to the digitalization of the healthcare and laboratory medicine. We are seeing the integration between the laboratory professionals and the clinicians, which would enhance the digitalization. This is being informed by the near patient testing. We want the patients to have their results as soon as possible. How best can we do that? We talk about digitalization. So we've got the Internet of Things in the mobile health world, where borders between the point of care and the centralized laboratories will no longer exist, because we have integrated the two systems so that the results are all in one. So the availability of diagnostic artificial intelligence, which supports utilization of the point of care results, which is coupled by the laboratory data, comes in because we are using IT and the digitalization. Now, and in the near future, or even right now, a new generation of electronic medical records with digital connection to the point of care, as well as the central area where we do the testing in a massive lab, or at the home where we consider patients who are away from the critical care area. This is emerging with the healthcare models as proposed by the report from the IFCC, Emerging Technologies Division. The central laboratory robotization. So we are talking about automation that is happening in management of results, in processing of samples. That's on one side. Then on the other side, we've got a point of care testing extension, which is there. So the big data, which has already been mentioned in the algorithm for recording this and reporting an artificial intelligence, needs to come in. So it's a challenge to the scientists. It's an opportunity at the same time where we have to handle big data. Results coming from the point of care testing, results from the centralized laboratory, and integrate this so that we do not end up repeating and repeating and repeating the tests. The algorithms that have already been talked about will emerge because we have all the data available. It's us there processing that data and be able to come up with the artificial intelligence brain to deal with that. So the digitalization of healthcare and the laboratory medicine, also currently the healthcare debate which we have leads to the healthcare reorganization strategy. The healthcare setting has to be reorganized, where the hospitals should be devoted to emergencies and intensive care, while the chronic patient is decentralized in communities. We cannot just look at the labs as the labs in centralized places. We must have data that is coming from those communities where the patient is near the patient, and the one that is generated in the centralized place, then that improves the healthcare. In this slide, the laboratory diagnostic test may be a driver for best medical decision based on the interaction between those. So this may be of value in home to hospital care, because patients who are chronically ill cannot be kept in hospital. Those who need critical care must be in hospital, but this must be integrated so that our healthcare delivery is so good. So the future balance between testing in centralized labs and the testing in the point of care is difficult. It's difficult to predict, really, because we have got as scientists our fears that the point of care is not superintended by a lab qualified individual. It's the responsibility of scientists to try and integrate this information that is coming from the different sides. So new mobile devices and online services in new context of home, bedside, and whatever care must be there so that the data is integrated. And the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, which has already been mentioned, can allow the combination of the data and from different hospital settings and the point of care testing, as well as the central laboratory. So we've got 3 places where this data is all coming together. We need to look at learning the predictive models as a distributed learning. So the synergies between the point of care and laboratory consolidation is something that we need to think about as we modernize our scientific careers. So availability of large population medical data sets open the way to approaches based on analysis of data to generate diagnostic hypotheses. We have got all that data. We need to harness the synergies between the two sides. The point of care test area data sets imaged by population diagnostic records derived by area or network laboratory data, which means that we develop a real-world artificial intelligence diagnostic support tool from that information. So in that light, the use of point-of-care technologies will offer us an opportunity to promote the best use of lab results. Quality must be also looked at, and these results, which are generated at the point of care, must be integrated in the system. So this approach may be operated in remote, in primary, and also secondary diagnostic. And the synergies of laboratory diagnosis between the two, the centralized and point of care, with all real patient diagnostic data available as present in the limbs that we have, will unlock artificial intelligence based on potential diagnostic support tools, now providing a quicker and more accurate and less expensive diagnosis. Less expensive in that we do not have to keep on repeating. Now we've got algorithms that we have developed by integrating the data sets from those different settings. So that's the point of care and the challenge which presents opportunities for us to step up to the challenge. There is something called, we have got clinical scientists, but we want to improve ourselves to that level of a consultant clinical scientist. How does a scientist become a consultant clinical scientist? So a consultant clinical scientist is trained to manage pathology laboratories and services in many pathology specialties. This is more evident in from my experience in the UK. I'm not sure about South Africa. In Zimbabwe, it's not, we're not at that level, but people in the lab sciences aspire to get to that level. We need to have training available for them to get to that level. So this includes toxicology and genetics. We've got consultant clinical scientists who train to the same level as medically qualified pathologists, which now takes us back to where we started with pathologists before the scientists came up. But now the technician became a scientist, technologist, became a clinical scientist, and now a consultant clinical scientist at the same level with autonomy in their profession. We work together, yes, but as a profession, we're able to stand alone, stand on our own and be able to have authority over what is generated in the labs. So combining years of scientific expertise with our training in patient care, the clinical scientists at consultant level will oversee the diagnosis of disease. They will also lead services and guide a wide range of healthcare staff. Just like their doctor counterparts, consultant clinical scientists specialize in particular areas. So there are areas where a consultant clinical scientist can specialize in. So we have got some established ones. So consultant clinical scientists are essential forces in improving healthcare. They set evidence-based standards for laboratories and bring in new technologies in. Because of the changes in demographics, changes in diseases that are coming up, we need to be able to match that by bringing new technologies and scientific methods which would transform the outcomes of patients. For most, sometimes coming from the research and sometimes in the setting that we have. So consultant clinical scientists who specialize in particular areas, like I say. So we've got clinical chemistry is well established in many countries. Same as microbiology for consultant clinical scientist who is coming from the side of the lab profession as opposed to a medical person. So that's what we have. Of late, cellular pathology and hematopathology has had challenges in getting lab scientists to upgrade to that level. But I'm happy to say that the Royal College of Pathology in England now has got a framework for the hematology scientists to upgrade to the level of a fellow who is a consultant clinical scientist in hematology. So the examination for the fellow for hematology are designed to assess a trainee's knowledge, skills, and behavior in the fields detailed in higher specialist training. The possession of the fellow of the Royal College of Pathology in hematology is increasingly a requirement for appointment to consultant clinical scientists post in hematology. So these are clinical scientists who are not medically qualified, but lab-based. So clinical scientists is a title which is protected by statutes. I'm talking about what they have in the UK, and can only be used by individuals who are registered. So the changing roles of scientists, as we have seen from the beginning up to now, scientists are involved in sustainability issues who are closely interact with stakeholders. So the stakeholders drive this in many respects. From experience, it is insufficient to only provide knowledge or evidence to these stakeholders. We need to take them on board, because they might experience that the traditional role of scientists is not appropriate anymore. Actually, it's not appropriate anymore. If we stay where we were, and considering how science has moved, we will be left out. So stakeholders are experts themselves in their field and can take up important roles in problem definition, which is giving us a reality check as scientists. Thank you very much for listening. I rest my case.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maramba, for that interesting presentation. And we have had 2 presentations, and I'm sure there is some issues to dissect further. So in the chat box, I do not see anyone who has posted an input or a question. So I'll open up to anyone who would want to have something to add or a question about the medical laboratory career opportunities, where we are going and where we see ourselves going as medical laboratory professionals. It's in. I see Abubakar Tuku is raising their hand, so we'll ask you to unmute. Can you unmute? Can you unmute your mic?
Yeah. Yes.
All right.
I did.
You can go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this great presentation, and it's really enlightening. I'm calling from Kano, Nigeria. My plea is I happen to be the chairman of the Professional Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists here in Kano, and I would like our professional association to have more collaborations of this kind of webinar so that it will reach to, so that we have more reach to our members, because there are a lot of issues that we are left behind here. And the other question is about becoming a clinical consultant, laboratory consultants. I don't know, is it possible? What are the requirements and what are the link? I've learned from the presentations that it is being done in South Africa, here in Africa. So we would like to hear more on how someone become clinical medical laboratory scientist. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abubakar Tuka. And it's the reason why we put together this consortium is to ensure that we share knowledge and how to improve as the medical laboratory professionals in Africa. And I've shared my email. You have feel free to jot me an email so that at least I'll add you on my mailing list when we have a webinar. And we try also to retain the emails of colleagues who have attended previous sessions, and we alert them when there is a next session. But please do disseminate the information as widely as possible, and we ensure that we share this as a recorded session, so that all those who haven't attended can also be able to get the information and learn from one another. And I would want to put it across to my colleagues who have presented to comment on the consultant issue. Maybe we can start with Dr. Maramba, then Prof. Davison. You can comment.
Thank you, Dr. Mashingula, and thank you for the question, Abubakar. My experience, I've worked in the UK, I've worked in Zimbabwe. I can only talk about the experiences in those countries. As far as South Africa is concerned, I'll probably refer to Professor Davison. The system that works in the UK is straightforward, as I said in my presentation. The training is done through the Royal College of Pathology. There's a pathway in the examinations that are done with the Royal College of Pathology. So you need to be a scientist with a degree or specialism that you want. Then you follow the training program. That's what I can say about the becoming a consultant in the using the Royal College of Pathology in England.
Okay.
And as far as Zimbabwe is concerned, we haven't got a program yet.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Maramba. Prof. Davison, would you want to add anything?
Yes, a little bit. I am very, very happy to hear that the UK has included hematology as part of their program, because I know they hadn't before. But as far as South Africa is concerned, we do not have a proper program for a medical lab scientist to become a clinical consultant scientist. And I think that in South Africa, we're a long way off. Pathologists actually still are see themselves as very dominant, and yes, I think our profession as well has a long way to go in realizing that and putting those programs into place. So this is not available in South Africa, but it is, I think, a very enlightening thing. And I think it's something as Africans we should be looking into together and perhaps introducing it here as well. So that's my comments.
Thank you very much, Prof. Davison and Dr. Maramba. Just also to add, to say, the coming together of us as African practitioners help us to exchange knowledge and learn from one another and learn what's happening in other countries, which we can benefit us as practitioners in Africa. And we stand a good position to be able to change the way we do business, because remember, we are the ones who affect the policies in our profession per se, because we are the ones who are involved in our health professions, authorities. We have an input in there as well. So we also stand a chance to be able to initiate the dialogue towards where we want to go and where we believe would benefit the population. And it's good that we can share the knowledge and share the experience, and as academic institutes which are also facilitating this, we should be able now to ensure that the training programs that we are now thinking of or design would address some of these issues. So it's good that we can begin brainstorming over this. So it's very essential that we begin this dialogue and take the next step. And the next step involves changing policies and also the training institutions responding to that. Bernard Bondo had raised his hand. Do you still want to say something? We will unmute Mr. Bernard Bondo. Can you unmute your mic?
Hello.
Bernard.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, I have an interest in integration, as it was been put across that we can integrate medical laboratory and the ICT. I just wanted to ask, is it feasible to have ICT part in the programs that we learn in our colleges, or also have them as a part of trainings in a professional development careers, so that we can have a lot of people who have the ICT knowledge and also who are working as laboratory technician or technologist or laboratory scientist. to be able to make some other programs, which most of the time is like the issue of limbs and the computer, that we also ask the IT guys and also some other people who are non-lab personnel to work on, so that we can at least make use of the stuff that we have and also make it available to everyone. I just wanted to ask on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard Bondo, for that. I will put it to the panelists. I'll start with Prof. Davison, then go to Dr. Maramba.
Yes, thank you for that question. And that is a very thought-provoking question, because I think it is becoming essential for us to include these IT skills. At the moment, I think we do have computer literacy and this sort of thing in our programs, but it's got to go further than that. And I'm talking, I think, about bioinformatics, the interpretation of all this big data, and what Dr. Maramba talked about, integrating all this data coming from point of care, etc. So I say to you, yes, even and I'm not sure how, and I'm going to open this, and I'd love to hear Dr. Maramba's opinion. I think that it must be incorporated into our courses, but I also think we need to look at perhaps a specialization in bioinformatics, because I think it's growing at such a rate. There's a need for clinical bioinformaticists to process data from all of these places, interpret it, analyze it, but I think on a different level. So my answer to you is yes. The how, though, is perhaps something that this group could talk about. And yeah, I would like input from everybody there. So can I hand back to you, Ian, and maybe Dr. Maramba can add to the debate.
Yes, thank you, Glenda. Dr. Maramba, can you add on that?
Thank you, Dr. Machingola. Thank you for the question. My addition, I'm happy that Prof. Davison talked about the bioinformatics, because that's a new area in our world here, but it's been developed in other countries. And that area needs to have scientists trained on. As far as the training is concerned or integration is concerned, in Zimbabwe, at undergraduate level, we have got very little material taught at undergraduate level. The argument is our programs are already overloaded. So what has happened is, for example, in the University of Zimbabwe, we have got an undergraduate program which is called Medical Analytics and Informatics as an undergraduate. Then there's also a postgraduate program where scientists who have trained in medical lab sciences can go on and do a master's program there on as far as that is concerned. As far as developing limbs, I have got examples from Zimbabwe as well as the UK of scientists, medical lab scientists, who have gone on to specialize in lab information systems, but as a postgraduate training program. So my answer would be, in short, as far as the current undergraduate program is concerned, there seems to be an overload on the material. Yes, it's important to have an appreciation, but as far as incorporating it to the level that we would want, it is a bit difficult. So we can take it as an additional training or postgraduate training. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maramba, and thank you, Prof. Davison. I'm also of the school of thought that at undergraduate level, we produce a generalist who has as much of everything as possible, which enables them to be a practitioner. Then at specialization now, we can be able to allow them to specialize in a field at mastery level. So that's my school of thought. But at least if someone has the basics, they can even utilize that basics even to design something. That's also another school of thought as well. But specialization should be open at mastery level, even up to doctoral.
Yeah, just to add to that, I agree with you, Ian. I'm also more and more becoming of the thought that specialization should be postgraduate, the intense specialization. And I think in that sense, the University of Zimbabwe is ahead of us in South Africa.
May I also add that the member who asked the question, maybe they could, if they want links with the fellow scientists who have gone on to do IT, specialize in IT, they could, through the organizer, Dr. Machingura, he ask for contacts. That can help, if that can help, rather.
That's an excellent idea. I think we've lost Ian. I don't know if he's going to try and join us again.
I think it's connectivity problems, suppose.
Hi all, I think Ian, he lost his connection. I can see there is other participants who would like to ask a question. I'm just putting you on unmute. You can ask your question, Yusuf. Yusuf, can you unmute yourself, please? Yusuf Othman Sharif.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Sorry, I was connected to a Bluetooth device. Like I was saying, I said, my name is Yusuf Sharif. I'm a laboratory technician, also a laboratory student from Sierra Leone. I want to thank the panelists, the host, and the presenters for this webinar. You know, it's an eye opener for some of the presentation that the first presenter did. Like the last presenter was saying, over the years, there are no post degree courses for laboratory sciences in Sierra Leone. But since the outbreak of Ebola, the institution now have adopted medical BSc honors in medical laboratory sciences and also public health laboratory sciences courses in Sierra Leone. So, however, there are still some areas that I think we still lack in the laboratory field for students. Like if the next G sequencing, the first presenter was talking about, those things we've never learned them in school, unless after graduation when you've started working, or you're fortunate to attend some training programs, some workshop there. That was the time you start hearing stuff like that, next gene sequencing, whole genome sequencing. And for me, I'm really passionate about that. I would like to know more about sequencing. I'm just requesting if this organizer, if we can have a free online courses on next genome sequencing, which I'm sure that will enable other laboratory students, other laboratory professionals who do not have any idea about it to learn more about it. Secondly, I would like to suggest, if as an African as a whole, if we can have a student body purely for laboratory sciences or biomedical laboratory sciences, one student body in Africa, which like whenever we'll be organizing seminars from one region to another, then people will be interacting, they'll know ourselves more. So those are the things those are my concerns.
All right, thank you very much, Yusuf. I would ask Prof. Davison and Dr. Maramba to respond on that one.
I can respond on the, and I think what Yusuf is raising is really excellent. On the next generation sequencing, and here I'd like to suggest perhaps a webinar on that. At CPUT, we do have people who could present at such a webinar on what it is and the base and the technologies. And I know that Prof. Macha, who heads up our unit and is the dean, she often has wet workshops on next generation sequencing, but obviously then you would have to be present. But I do think the offering of a webinar, and if Ian is here, I heard his voice, for future might be a very good idea, you know. And certainly we would participate that. And then to comment on your second suggestion of having a student body, I cannot think of anything better. I really think that it's time Africa worked together. And that's from student level, sharing experiences, because your experiences in Sierra Leone are very different to ours. But I can tell you now, we can learn from your experience with Ebola and how to control that. So I think having a student forum, and Ian, if you're listening, is a really excellent idea. So those are my comments on that. I'm so glad you raised that. Thank you, Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Prof. Davison. Dr. Maramba, would you want to comment on that one? Dr. Maramba?
Hello, yes. I think Prof. Davison nailed it. It's very important for us to collaborate, especially as Africans, so that we have got similar systems or uniform sort of system. We learn from other. I know South Africa is way ahead of most of our African countries, but we can benefit from collaborations with the specialists in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Just to comment, we're not way ahead on everything, Dr. Maramba, and I think sometimes in education of our professionals, I think Zimbabwe has in fact taken the lead there. So we can learn from you as well. Thank you.
Yes, Prof. Glenn Davison. That's where the whole essence of this collaboration is to ensure that we can share as much as we can share, and the view or the vision of the consortium is to set up a center of excellence, but also allow us to use our online to be able to share knowledge and skills. And with the coming in of technology, we are on webinars, and we are also able to share even the genomics practical hands-on on knowledge and skills via webinars as well. So that's essential. I've shared my email address. I'll be very glad to link the students, and so that they can also link with the Students Association in Zimbabwe and the Students Association in South Africa, Nigeria, in all the African countries that are part of the consortium, so that the students can also begin working together. Because I remember my relationship with Prof. Davison, Prof. Macha, Prof. Erasmus started even when I was a student, and it grew even now that we are older professors. Together, so we would want that also to come. Those who are raising their hands, so just say. So in conclusion, we have two guys who are raising their hands. May you kindly unmute, starting with Yusuf. You have already said, so I think it's only one. So Dika Ahmad Ziripi, in conclusion, you can hear what you want to say before we close.
Okay, thank you for the platform. Just wanted to thank the two speakers for what they presented today. It was very insightful. I have a question. I'm a student at UCT studying in the Division of Forensic Medicine. So I wanted to ask that, is there actual evidence that physicians or doctors or even pathologists require, let's say, genomic data in their diagnosis? Or is it something that at present we want to advance in order to sort of be at par with the rest of the world? Thank you.
All right, we can ask Dr. Maramba to go in first, then Prof. Davison. That's our last question.
Hello?
Yes, you can go ahead.
I think I missed the first part of the speaker's question because my connection was poor, I think. Can you just repeat for me, Dr. Machingura, or we can pass it on to Prof. Davison?
All right. You was asking the genomics, its use in diagnosis. Is it something that is current, or that we want?
Hi, Ian. I can take it. I hope Dirk and everybody.
So whilst you can also ask Prof. Davison to say something.
Okay, I will say something. Thank you, Dirk, for that question, and I think it's an important question. Okay, I've unmuted myself. I hope everybody can hear me. Dirk, that's a very important question. And yes, genomics is being used in diagnosis. And I think as laboratory professionals, we also need to educate clinicians of the benefits. Let's just take COVID-19 for an example. Genomics has been essential in tracing the virus, identifying the various variants, and that is understanding the sequence of the virus and being able to trace that through the 2 years that we've had the pandemic. They've been able to very early on identify the emergence of a new variant. So certainly in pathogens, viruses, etc., genomics and genetics is taken hold. In malignancy, and here's where I come from, and Dr. Maramba as well, hematological malignancies, leukemias, genomics is fast taking precedence, especially with personalized medicine, the identifying of genes that can be targeted for therapy. And I'm just going to mention one, chronic myeloid leukemia. The treatment has been revolutionized because of genomics being put into the diagnosis of that disease. So in answer to your question, yes, genomics is being used in Africa and increasing in Africa in the diagnosis and treatment of diseases. I hope that has answered your question, but please feel free to add to it.
Thank you for that.
There's not much that I can add. Remember, the purpose of diagnostic, we look at patient outcomes. As Prof. Davison rightfully said, for the right medication to be given, and for us to, when you do prognostication, when you do minimum residual diseases, we need to be able to do genomics. That's very useful in the management of patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Davison, and thank you, Dr. Maramba. Yes, genomics is currently being used, and it's actually will be used more. And in that light, I would like to thank you all for attending, starting with the presenters. Thank you, Prof. Davison. Thank you, Dr. Maramba, for taking your time in preparing. And also, we want to thank our colleagues from Empower School of Health for their technical backup, Sonia and the team, and colleagues from the Africa Federation of all the let's enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much. And happy Lab Week.
Yes, and thank you to you, Ian. I hope you can hear me, Dr. Mashangura, for spearheading this consortium. It is very valuable, and I would like to personally thank you for your effort. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and thank you for your contribution to the consortium. We will together we can achieve more. Thank you very much.